Good morning, everybody. We'll try it one. Well, good morning. That's a little better. I want to welcome everybody to Lighthouse Church. I am glad that you guys are here this morning. And I want to let you know that Lighthouse Church is a come-as-you-are church and that everybody is welcome, no matter where you're at on your spiritual journey and your walk with Christ. And we are a church of a fellowship of believers who come together to support one another and lift each other up. And usually we do that by getting to know each other, but right now we're not going to do that. We're doing things a little bit different. And instead of getting up and walking around and greeting each other, we're just going to wave and say hi from across the church. So as I see that everybody kind of made their way in and kind of sat in seats distance from each other, this is a principle and a practice we want to keep doing as we come in. Stay with the group of people that you came with and leave several seats between each group. We're glad that you guys are all here, and please join me in a time of worship and stand up, and we're going to sing.
We've waited for this day, we're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here, you're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see. A mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the sky, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now, Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. The floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough, no. Then you came along and put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Yeah. Oh, there's not not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing, no, better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing, no, better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can.
Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, 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 let the king of my heart be the wind inside my soul. the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh,
You're
never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh,
you are
when the night is holding on,
you are
you are holding on.
you are
When the night is holding on to me,
you are
you are holding on. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, good. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on.
You may be seated. We're going to continue our time of worship in prayer, so I'm going to ask you to join your heads and bow your heads in prayer with me. God, we thank you for the blessing of this beautiful day, Lord, this nice, warm spring day, God. We thank you that each day is anew, Lord, that your mercy is new each day. God, help us to fully embrace your love that you want to shower into our lives each day, Lord. Help us to be diligent in practicing the ways that your Son Jesus taught. Taking time, Lord, to spend with you, developing an ever deeper relationship, God, with you, from which joy and serenity and true freedom and peace will flow. God, be with us in this time, Lord, as there is uncertainties that face our world, Lord. With COVID spreading ever greater, be with those who have lost individuals, Lord, who have family members who are sick, and who have struggled, Lord, emotionally and mentally because of the restrictions in moving about. God, as our community opens up more so, Lord, for freer movement and interaction, God, just help us to do so wisely and to keep us safe and healthy, God. Lord, we know that there's healing power in your name, Lord. And we also know that you have placed individual on our heart to lift up to you in prayer. And we do so by name at this time. God, you know their needs, Lord. And we ask that you would show us how we might serve you by coming alongside and offering comfort, Lord, and giving love that you have so freely given to us, to others, God. Help us to be a community of believers that shines bright, Lord, showing others what a life surrendered to you looks like and what that manifests, Lord. Being kind, caring, and compassionate to all. God, we thank you that your Son came and modeled these things for us and showed us how to pray. And we all joined together in praying the prayer that he taught us, Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
All right. Thank you, Aaron, for leading us in prayer. And good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all today, and I want to thank you for coming out to worship with us. Some of you I haven't seen for a while. It's really good to see you. So want to welcome those who are watching on either YouTube or Facebook as well. If you don't know, we're live streaming this service. So hey, and you can sign in and let us know that you're here. We are going to we're going to do some announcements, but this would be normally the time we take the offering and the noisy offering. Actually, it's usually the time we do a children's message at this service, and we're kind of eliminating a lot of those contact times, so no children's message. There is no Sunday school yet. We're not sure when we're going to try to kind of re-implement that. There is a kids' time online that you can find a little bit later today, if you would like, where Beth and Lisa are going to be doing some kids' teaching and also an activity that families can do at home. We've been doing that every week. But if you happen to notice when you came in, there is a table where you can place an offering. And obviously we appreciate any financial support that you're able to give us during this time. And we also do have a jar out there for our noisy offering. We collect spare change every week. We decided not to have a ministry at Lighthouse to support those less fortunate, but to support other ministries that do that. So we collect change every week and we give it away. So that's what the jar is for out there. So let me share a couple of other quick things. Want you to know that small groups are still meeting at Lighthouse Church. And so if you have been part of any of our small groups, chances are they're still going, have been going the whole time, or they are restarting. Also, we would want you to know that tonight we do have meetings that take place here every Sunday evening at 5:30. There's an AA meeting as well as an Al-Anon meeting at the same time. And at 6:30 is our spirituality recovery group and our young adults. Spirituality recoveries for anybody where we come together. We're going to talk about this morning's topic, and we'll apply it to our lives and our life issues. Young adults, if you're 18 to 30ish, meet down at the House of Hope every Sunday night. Also, I want you to know that we have been live streaming on both Facebook and on YouTube our church services, but we've also been doing a teaching time each week that can be found there for Celebrate Recovery, or for Lighthouse Recovery, we've been calling it lately. We are going to be continuing that indefinitely, I think. So if you're kind of interested in a recovery teaching time, that's usually live sometime, like 11 o'clock on Wednesdays is what we've been doing, and then can be found on our website and Facebook page following that. So just kind of want to continue to lift up those things. When you think about the silver linings of the coronavirus, there's not a lot of them, but for us, that's been one of them. We had talked a long time about doing live streaming and getting stuff put together so that we could start down that path, and I took a pandemic to get us to do it. So there we are, right? So how's everybody doing? Good to see you today. I would normally tell you to grab a Bible that's around you, but we don't have them in the pews right now. We're kind of eliminating anything that people will touch and then somebody else will touch. So if you aren't, start bringing your own Bible to church, or maybe you've downloaded the Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app. It's a great app to have, a great resource. We are in Matthew 20 as we've been going through the Gospel of Matthew. So you can turn to Matthew chapter 20 with me. And today we are going to deal with just the story of the parable of the workers in the vineyard. So we're going to just get started in chapter 20 today. And I would like to begin reading at verse 1. Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early one morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay the normal daily wage and sent them out to work. At 9 o'clock in the morning, he was passing through the marketplace, and he saw some people standing around doing nothing. So he hired them, telling them he would pay them whatever was right at the end of the day. So they went to work in the vineyard at noon, and again at 3 o'clock he did the same thing. At 5 o'clock that afternoon he was in town again, and he saw some more people standing around. He asked them, 'Why haven't you been working today?' They replied, 'Because no one hired us.' The landowner told them, 'Then go out and join the others in my vineyard.' That evening he told the foreman to call the workers in and pay them, beginning with the last workers first. When those hired at 5 o'clock were paid, each received a full day's wage. When those hired first came to get their pay, they assumed they would receive more. But they too were paid a day's wage. When they received their pay, they protested to the owner, 'Those people worked only 1 hour, and yet you've paid them just as much as you paid us who worked all day in the scorching heat.' He answered one of them, 'Friends, I haven't been unfair. Didn't you agree to work all day for the usual wage? Take your money and go. I wanted to pay this last worker the same as you. Is it against the law for me to do what I want with my money? Should you be jealous because I am kind to others? So those who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last." So we have an employment topic, so I have an employment joke. Two factory workers are talking. The woman says, "I can make the boss give me the day off." The man says, "How in the world are you going to do that?" Woman says, "Just wait and see." She hangs herself upside down from the ceiling. The boss comes in and he says, "What in the world are you doing?" Woman replies, "I'm a light bulb." The boss says, "You've been working way too much, haven't you? You must be going crazy. Why don't you take the day off?" Man starts to follow her out the door when she's leaving, and the boss says, "Hey, where are you going?" And the man says, "I'm going home too. I can't work in the dark." They had no sense of humor at 9 o'clock, but you have a pretty good sense of humor. I thought it was a pretty good joke. So with a work or employment topic, we are going to ask a work-related question. So we're lightening up the question time today. I've asked this question in the past before, I know, but we'll have a little fun with it, I hope. What was the best or the worst job that you ever had? And we ask a question every week. People are invited to answer it, and Aaron's going to run around with a microphone. If you'd like to answer, get my attention. We're going to have you stand up, speak directly into the mic, but don't touch it, and give us a brief answer. Yeah, here you go. Who'd like to share with us today? What was the best or the worst job that you have ever had?
Family, I'm Julie. I guess I'll talk so none of the rest of you will.
They will.
I think the worst job I ever had actually was working for the DMV. I had to sit at a desk all day, and if anybody knows me at all, I don't do well sitting at a desk not speaking. And I was just having to transfer like the numbers or the letters on the VIN numbers for the application to the paper and match all day long, and I repeatedly fell asleep at my desk, so they didn't like me very much.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I got a couple more going up already.
Morning, my name is Keith. Knowledge Valley, the worst job that I ever had was feeding my addiction. You know, I was an alcoholic for 30 years, and I lived on the streets for over 13, and the only thing I could ever do was hustle, hustle, hustle. That's all I ever did. So that was my job.
Yeah, thanks, Keith, for mentioning that. Yeah.
I'm Matthew. Mine was digging bulbs, tulip bulbs out of the ground by hand in a flower farm in Northern California. You had a burlap sack on your back and you crawled on your hands and knees, and the foreman gave you a pair of leather gloves, and you crawled on your hand. After they tilled the ground, they were too delicate to pull out with anything else but your bare hands, so you know. And I lasted 2 rows while the women who had babies on their back next to me just kept going all day long. And I learned what real hard farm work was all about that day. But it was, I lasted about 4 hours, and the guy, I'm good. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. Got one over here.
Thinking back, I've had a lot of different jobs. I started working when I was pretty young, and I also did day labor for several years. And when I look back at what my favorite or least favorite jobs were, it just goes back to my coworkers. A lot of those jobs, the work sucked. Some of them I liked the work, but the ones I remember, like Blockbuster Video, you very young people haven't heard of that, but it was a place where we would rent videos, and instead of streaming it. And my coworkers were great. The pay sucked, the job kind of sucked, and also working here is also, I love the coworkers. So.
I was hoping you weren't going to keep going with the "it sucked" theme there. So, when you brought up the church, thank you, Jeremy. All right. Who else would like to share? I'd love to do a couple more. We're going to take a couple of minutes here today. So.
I'm Mary, and
Hey, Mary.
the best job that I ever had was being a mother. I loved that job.
Being a mother, is that what you said? Yeah. All right. Who else?
The best job that I ever had was coaching football with my kids. I took one all the way through Little League through high school, and now he's playing college ball. And my other youngest is in high school ball now. So that was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and I ended up getting something like 35 kids a year at the house somehow.
Very cool. Thanks, Mike. All right. Anybody else want to share? Anybody else? All right. Another one over here. We'll wrap up with this one.
Hi. The best job I had was I worked for Taco Bell for 34 years. Kind of worked my way up from hourly guy to being an area manager. The worst job I had was at Taco Bell. The owner that I worked for was a great guy. Passed away, and the last 3 years were a veritable hell. Working for a guy who didn't care about his people and stuff. So it's not about the job, it's about the people.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think we'll wrap up there, and I love that question. We'll talk about it tonight at 6:30 if you want to join us. So I want to start this way this morning with you. I have a confession to make. Sometimes I can be envious of others. Say, OMG. Yes, it's true. It started when I was young. Other kids had stuff that I wished I had. When I was a little bit older, it continued. I was envious of the kids who were more talented than me, or who were more athletic than me, or perhaps more popular than me. Somebody say me too. All right. For some of us, our substance use may have started with a root in envy. It made us feel like we fit in finally. For some, our mental health struggles might be related to envy. You can fill in the blank. I wish I was, and we could fill it in with a lot of things. I wish I was more like him or more like her, or better at this or better at that, or I had more of those or I had less of these. I grew up in a culture that taught, don't think too highly of yourself. And for many of us, we took that as, don't think that you are anyone special. Often, even the religious messages of our youth taught us you need to do certain things, and you shouldn't do other certain things, and you've got to be better. And when we struggled or when we failed, we wondered if we could ever be good enough. As a young adult, I felt less than if I couldn't provide for myself or for my family. I didn't like accepting help from others, much less asking for help from others. I've shared with you before that God gave me no handyman abilities or interest whatsoever. And my parents and my in-laws would give me tools for Christmas so that they would have something to use when they would come to the house. And the truthfulness of it is that in my younger years, this would often touch a nerve of inadequacy. I've grown up believing that you work hard, you take care of your own business, be independent, be self-reliant. You know what I mean? Anybody else grow up in a kind of a similar way? In many ways, our virtues are often our vices, right? Those things that are good in us also can sometimes be our biggest challenges. And that would certainly be true for me, because it was hard for me to ask for help. As I've gotten older, I've become more and more content with who I am, and what I can do and what I can't do. Some of this, I think, just comes with age. It's kind of, I think the older we get, in theory, we'd like to think that we grow a little bit more comfortable in our own skin. Am I right? But I also know that some of that has come from my walk with God and from my learning of His Word in the Bible. But also, and this is kind of where I'm going with this, some of that comfort with who I am has also come out of my struggles. I remember early on in my recovery journey hearing people talk about being grateful alcoholics or being grateful addicts, and frankly, it bugged the heck out of me. And I was struggling, I was sick, and I thought, what in the world do we have to be thankful for? What I've learned is that it's often out of our struggles and difficulties that God creates beautiful things in us. We sang that in our second song tonight. You know, God has the ability to turn graves into gardens. Yeah. And it is often out of our struggles that God works and creates in us things like gratitude and contentment, humility, and hope. And there's these scripture references that I still, on my most honest days, say I don't really fully understand or get, but they're there and they give me some encouragement. One of them hangs in the entryway out there. It comes from Romans chapter 5, where the Apostle Paul says, we rejoice in our sufferings. When's the last time you rejoiced in your sufferings? We rejoice in our sufferings because we know suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope never disappoints us. It's pretty profound when you think about it. I'm still envious today, now and then. I've learned that it's part of my sinful nature. I'm envious of people who figure out some of the things I just talked about earlier in life because it took me a lot of years. I'm envious of pastors who've got life and ministry all figured out, or at least appear to. I can be envious of great preachers and packed churches and big church parking lots. And I can be envious of people who age gracefully and live life so fully. But I have learned a few things over the years that I wanted to share with you that kind of is related to this and related to the story that I'm going to talk about this morning. First thing that I've learned is that life is not always fair, and that there are no promises of fairness in life. I've learned that I need to take responsibility for the things that I'm responsible for, and that there's still going to be some stuff that happens that just there's no explanation. It may feel unfair, but it's life. You with me? Yeah, life isn't always fair. The second thing that I've learned, God has made me the way that he wants me to be. If God wanted me to have handyman abilities, he would have put them in me. When I was growing up, I used to watch this cartoon. Some of you, you're old enough, you watched it too. It was this guy who ate a lot of spinach, and when he would get strong. And he had this saying, you probably know the saying, he would say, I am what I am, and that's what I am, right? You remember? And you know, who'd have thunk that as a little child, I watched one of the most realistic, one of the most helpful spiritual principles being taught that I would have ever heard. And because it took me a lot of years to learn it. I am what I am, and that's what I am. You know, there's a reality that part of life is just kind of accepting who we are. And that we are human. And that we make mistakes. Am I correct? Yeah, this room's filled with all sorts of mistakes. And here's the third thing that I've kind of learned that's kind of related to all this, I think, is that gratitude is the key to life in the kingdom. Gratitude is key. And part of this journey of redemption and part of what Lighthouse is all about is coming to accept that I can be grateful for who I am. And you can be grateful for who you am. All right? Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says this. It's going to be on the screen. It says, guard your hearts above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Pretty significant verse. In the Message, Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of the Bible, he translates this line this way. Keep vigilant watch over your heart. That's where life starts. It's where true life starts, is out of the heart. And things like gratitude and acceptance and contentment, they are matters of the heart. Now, maybe some of this we kind of have to learn the hard way. Because I've had to learn quite a bit of it the hard way. Some of it we might learn with aging, but what I want to share with you this morning is that if you are open, I think Jesus tries to teach us some of these principles of God's kingdom. And our challenge is to listen and to be open. Say, I am open. So let's take a moment to kind of reflect on what Jesus has to say. So he tells this story, workers of in the vineyard. I love this story. I love this story because I think we can all identify with the various characters in this story. Depending on where I'm at, I can kind of identify with all of them. What you may not know, even if the story is very familiar to you, is that the average workday in Jesus' time was a long day. It was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They worked 6 days a week, usually. And it was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and so it was a pretty long workday. And for many people in Jesus' day, work was, they didn't just have a job. And so work was something that they found each day. And so, some of you have perhaps spent some time at day labor in our community. This was a pretty common thing back in Jesus' day. They were at day labor looking for somebody to hire them. The thing is that in Jesus' day, if you didn't work, chances are you weren't going to have anything to eat that day. And so a lot of the life existed simply on what I could earn today so that I could eat today. And so getting some work was pretty significant and important. And so people would hang around day labor most of the day, hoping that they would get some work and so that they could eat. And we read the story. The vineyard owner was out there probably sometime before 6 a.m., and he hired a bunch of guys, maybe some ladies. He said, I'll pay you, the normal day's wage. You know what that was? It was 1 denarius. Not sure what that equates to today. Not very much money, but enough to eat for a day. I'll pay you a day's wage. And so a bunch of them went out and started working, and then it says that the vineyard owner went back at 9 a.m., hired more people, went back at noon, hired more people, went back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hired more people, happened to be going by at 5 p.m. How many hours are left to work in the day? Just 1 hour. Hired some more and said, go and work, and I'll pay you what's fair. And so at the end of the workday, 6 p.m., we learned, they all get in line, and he says, I would like the people who were hired last to go first, and those who were first, you come through last. And the story is so interesting because those guys at the front of the line, they worked 1 hour, and they get paid a whole day's wage. And here's the part of the story that I just love, because in this part of the story, most of us here today, we can identify with the guys at the back of the line. And I know what they were thinking, because they were thinking the same thing that you would probably be thinking. Some of them would be looking at that and they'd say, holy cow, I wonder what I'm going to get paid today. It's going to be a big payday. Some of them were thinking this, I might save a little bit of that so that I can get ahead. A couple of us might think that. More of us would be thinking, I am eating tonight. No McDonald's for me. It is steak and potatoes, right? And then here's what some of them thought. This is what some of you would have thought. Some of them would have thought, I don't have to work tomorrow. I have enough for 2 or 3 days. Yeah, it's maybe not the best thing to think. Anyway, they get to the front of the line, and they're paid the same amount. You kind of heard the story. They get what was promised, right? No more, no less than anybody else. And boy, there's a lot of directions that we could go with this story this morning. And when I was kind of praying about it this week and thinking about our Lighthouse family, I kept being drawn to this idea that perhaps it would be good to just spend a little time with you thinking about how easy it is for us to think that life has dealt us a bad hand. That life has just dealt us a bad hand. Maybe you grew up in tough circumstances, didn't ask to grow up in them. Seems like you can never catch a break. Some of you probably feel that way. Maybe you didn't ask for your past trauma or abuse. I suspect there's nobody who asked for the disease of addiction or your mental health struggles. For some, it might seem like You have to labor all day for what you get, and others just seem to have it so much easier than you. Anybody ever feel that way? It's kind of like, they get their stimulus check on day one, and you're not sure if yours will ever come. That's what it's like. Like why do they catch the breaks? One of the most important verses in this story comes in verse 16. It's right at the end of the story where Jesus kind of reminds us that the way he looks at life is different than the way we look at life. At the end of verse 16, he says, "So those of you who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last." Kind of reminds us that when we come to know Jesus, he begins to tell us that I want you to know that I look at life differently than you do and the world does. That I look at life much different. He says all these things all over the Gospels that kind of indicate that his perspective is so different than ours. What do you mean the last are going to be first and the first are going to be last? What he wants to remind us of is that God knows where we're at and what we're going through, and he cares, loves you, provides for you. God knows where you are and what you're going through. He is with you in the journey that you are on. God is working in the labors of your life this day. He has begun a good work in you, and by George, he is going to complete it. One of the most profound Bible verses of all comes in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, where it says this. It'll be on the screen. "Now all glory to God, who is able through his mighty power at work within us to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think." Did you hear that? Do you actually believe that? That God might be able in our life to accomplish more than we would even dare ask him or think? So God cares about us. But he has a different perspective on life. Here's the deal. God didn't create you and me to be somebody else. He created you as his own unique masterpiece. He knows your struggles. He knows your mistakes. He knows your sin. And it is his desire to redeem those things. And his desire is for you to come to understand that he accepts you just as you are, so you can begin to accept yourself just as you are. Just keep moving forward. Work your day. Be content and grateful for where you are at. Seems like every month or two I kind of stand on this continuum line. Some of you have seen me do this a million times if you were counting. Because I think that one of our challenges, especially in the environment in which a lot of us live in this Lighthouse community, is to identify where I am today and to focus on gratitude and contentment where I am today. And so, wherever you are, from back there to out there, where do you find yourself today? Because so often in our lives, we can spend way too much time thinking about the past. And we often spend way too much time thinking about the future. And part of what I think Jesus wants us to do is to understand that God works primarily in today. He may redeem the past. He might have some plans for the future, but to get to the future, you have to be in today. And so identify where you are today. To do so with gratitude says, praise the Lord that I'm not back there anymore. Anybody feel that way? Yeah. So I can be grateful for that. I used to be back there. I was a mess. I'm still kind of a mess, but I'm not as big a mess. Praise the Lord. I can be grateful for that, right? Am I where I would like to be? Yeah. I might have some goals. I might have some hopes. I might have, have some dreams that I want to fulfill, or, I'm kind of moving in a particular direction. But today, we can learn to be grateful and content with where we are today, and that gratitude is the key. A couple of quotes. One is from G.K. Chesterton. He said, "Gratitude is the mother of all virtues." Beautiful quote. Another one by Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, a great theologian from the last century plus. He wrote, "I am a poor wretch whom God took charge of, and for whom he has done so indescribably much more than I ever expected, that I only long for the peace of eternity in order to do nothing but thank him." Wouldn't it be nice to get to that place of gratitude where, wherever I'm at, he has done more than I could have ever asked for? I have that feeling today, but not always that desire to just thank him for where I'm at. At its core, the parable of the workers of the vineyard is about service. All of chapter 20 is. We're going to look at more of chapter 20 next week. Jesus teaches us that in God's kingdom, we don't serve for reward or recognition. We serve because it's what we do. That's why we serve. We see things differently than the world does. When Jesus enters our lives and our hearts, he shapes a new way of looking at life. And that's really what the parable is about. The world says, the person who gets the most, that is the success. The kingdom says the person who gives the most, that is the success. The world says the person who scores is the guy who only had to work 1 hour and got a whole day's wage. The kingdom says, no, the successful person is the one who labored all day and was content with what he was given. I think that in many ways, Jesus is kind of longing for his followers in the telling of this parable to get up in the morning, maybe get on your knees or stand up and put your hands out to the Lord and say, Lord, here I am in line at day labor, in the kingdom labor's line, in service of you today. I've shared before that every morning, it's actually part of my workout routine. I say the long version of the Serenity Prayer a couple of times. I recite it out loud, and it has just become such an important part of my ritual, partly because it helps me, kind of remind myself I'm right here today. This is where I'm at. Not back there, not out there, I'm right here. And so I say that Serenity Prayer, and I try to think about it line by line. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, some of that stuff. The courage to change the things I can, that's some of today and some of the future. Wisdom to know the difference, and then it really gets meaty. Living one day at a time. Enjoying one moment at a time. Accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. Taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will. Why? So that I can be, what's the word? Reasonably happy in this life. And extraordinarily happy with you in the next. And so I want us to take home today this idea that part of our journey of faith, part of our journey with Jesus, or if you are kind of new to this whole thing, part of the spiritual journey of finding recovery and healing in your life, is to identify where I am today and to ask the Lord, what would you have me do in the place that I'm serving now, or the place that I find myself right now? Not, when I get my apartment, not when I get my own place or when I have a year of sobriety or I have, this depression finally lifted. Where would you have me? How would you have me serve in this place? What is it that I can do today in my gratitude and contentment for where I'm at? But not just about place, about time too. Lord, this is the time I'm in. I'm trying not to live in the past, but I'm also trying not to live in the future. So, I don't want to know necessarily what you're going to have me do tomorrow or next week or next year. I want to know, Lord, what are you going to have me do today? How can I be engaged with you today? How can I be more content with what you offer me by grace today? And what is it that I can know in my life with you where it serves you in a more full way today? God's grace is sufficient for this day. And so we're going to go here today and we're going to remember that our daily life when we get out of the bed is heading to day labor for the kingdom, right? That's what we're talking about. We're heading to day labor. Wherever it is that we find ourselves this week, wherever it is, that's the place that God is going to bless us and he's going to work through us. On this day, in this place, Lord, what would you have me do? Not tomorrow, not next week, but today. And we do it with a heart of gratitude, not envy. We remember that we came from back there, and we thank God that we're no longer there. And we know that God may be taking us somewhere into the future. But remember, I've shared this over the last few years, that God's plan for your life, God's will for your life, is not so much the circumstances of each day as it is the person you are becoming. That's God's will for your life, the person that you are becoming. And to know that and to begin to live with that in gratitude, that is kingdom living. And it is that begins to guard our hearts. And it's there that life begins, when we begin to accept that I am what I am, and that's all that I am. Amen. We're going to sing a closing song. God bless you. Thank you for being with me today and worshiping with me, and I hope you have a super day. Hope to see you next week, if not sooner.
What's the saying, Lord? It's you who gave me life, and I can't explain just how much you mean to me now that you have saved me, Lord. Give all that I am to you, that every day I can be a light that shines your name. Every day, Lord, I'll learn to stand upon your word, and I pray that I might come to know you more, that you would guide me in every single step I take, that every day I can be a light unto the world. Every day it's you I live for. Every day I'll follow after you. Every day I'll walk with you, my Lord. Every day, Lord, I'll learn to stand upon your word, and I pray that I might come to know you more, that you would guide me in every single step I take, that every day I can be a light unto the world. Every day it's you I live for. Every day I'll